Hello there. My name is William Hadala, and I am the host of the Watt Hour. And today I'd like to welcome my good friend and business partner, Ken Thompson from KTTS, who is their CEO. How are you doing, Ken?
Doing awesome. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. So welcome to the Watt Hour. And, for those that don't know you yet, can you give us a brief overview of KTTS and your personal journey as its CEO?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. And yeah, so KTTS has evolved from being a one-man rep company, which was me, started back in 2012, till a current entity, which we have about 50 global partners, and we do everything from cradle to grave on engineering services and manufacturing globally. We have about 150 manufacturing sites that we use worldwide, and just trying to add the most value to each customer depending on where they're at. If they're a military aerospace, they have obviously different requirements than an automotive manufacturer or medical manufacturer. So we have a very, very deep bench of suppliers who can support most companies in every global supply chain requirement they have.
Excellent, Ken. And my role as the head of commercialization and strategy for American Lithium Energy, you're an incredible business partner, and we recognize that KTTS has a unique vertical capability, whether it's from precision cable assemblies to full system integration. My question for you is, how did that capability evolve, and how does it position you in today's high-tech manufacturing ecosystem?
Yeah, well, that's probably a longer story than this from all the details on that, but I'll just share with you the typical way it has happened is a customer has came to me that I've been supporting in one product line, and they've had a need for something else that I currently did not have a supplier for. So then I would go out and look for the best-in-class supplier that I could partner up with to support them. A great example of that is a company that we just added recently, which was referred to us through one of our media partners, Echo Blue. And, we have not been involved with cybersecurity. And now we have a partner in Periphery who is absolutely cutting edge cyber security AI for all different kinds of markets. So it's either came through a referral or, like in your case with American Lithium Energy, your CFO reached out to me and we started discussions, and then found out that, there's a value proposition. So it's got to be a win-win relationship. And in my evaluation now at the stage of the company that we're at, we're getting a lot of people approaching us to represent them. But unless I'm adding value to them and they're adding value to me, and it's a win-win situation, it doesn't make sense just to have a redundancy in the supply chain unless they have a niche that they could bring value to my customers.
Yeah, and you're not just a rep for American Lithium Energy, but a partner that's enabling high-performance technology. What is it that attracted you to work with American Lithium Energy specifically? Besides myself, of course.
Well, of course, yeah, that would be the number one reason. But prior to meeting you, the week that Danny called me, I had 3 customers reach out to me asking for US-made lithium batteries. And until that point, we had represented another company that is more in the alkaline batteries. And then we had one that was an offshore lithium battery pack manufacturer, but we did not have a domestic US ITAR AS9100 source for our domestic military supply chain. And so when Danny reached out, I said, funny. I have had 3 of those guys call me just this week asking me for support. So immediately I knew that we could add value to our customers. So then it became a suggestion of, how do I add value to you? And then after our first meeting with yourself and Dr. Fan and Danny, it became very clear that, we could add a lot of value and help you guys accomplish the goals that you're reaching.
So let's talk about power, literally. In your opinion, how critical are advanced battery cells like American Lithium Energies to the future of autonomous systems such as UAVs, drones, and things like directed energy weapons?
Well, I'm learning more and more about this every day, as this has not been my 35 years in history in this industry. However, what we've found is that, with American Lithium Energy, they have the absolute highest power in the smallest package possible. And for the drone companies and the people who are putting these things up in the air, weight is critical. So if we can provide them twice the power in the same package size, same weight, or sometimes even less weight than what they have, it gives them additional flight time. It gives them additional capabilities. So we have many examples of where we've been able to do that, where we've added so much value to them, because instead of having to swap out their batteries every 30 minutes, they're not having to swap them out for an hour. So that time that drone's not up in the air, as we all know, time is money.
Absolutely. And you've worked with global defense and aerospace clients over many years. What are they demanding when it comes to power systems, and how are American Lithium Energy cells standing out?
Well, my experience has been they're demanding, the absolute highest performance. And the thing that they over and over again, I think, are finding is that American Lithium Energy is kind of like the best, not, well-known secret out there. They don't know about you. And so when we get a requirement from them and they say, okay, we need this and this, and then we come back to them and we exceed that, then they're like, how do you can't do that. And then we send them a sample and they test it and they're like, holy shit, this thing exceeded the expectation. So then that's how we've had so many successes in such a short amount of time, is the proof's in the pudding, right? Give us your requirement. We send you a sample, you test it, and it works better than we said it was going to.
Now, your team at KTTS is known for building the impossible, and that's why you and I have become such good friends. Is, you're making cables, integrated electronics, and now working on energy storage. What approach when building mission critical components for platforms that absolutely cannot? So what are from your approach, what are the platforms that absolutely cannot fail, and how do you address that?
Well, from the cable assembly standpoint, having partners who are space qualified, having partners who are ITAR AS9100, they're building to such a high quality level that, that is the critical infrastructure. So these companies expect that from a printed circuit board assembly. A lot of times there's a phrase called an ADCAP, and that's kind of like AS9100 on steroids. And then you have space level. So depending on where the company is at and their growth, they have these ruggedized systems, depending on, every example is different, but their expectations are that, they're going to be dealing with a quality world-class supplier that can not only meet their quality standards, but do it in a time frame that meets their program schedules. And that's where we've been able to pair up American Lithium Energy and KTTS. So an example that just happened this week is one of our customers who we were supporting on a battery had a requirement for a cable assembly, and the current supplier wasn't meeting that expectation. And we got one of our other suppliers involved who I've been in relationship with for 30 years, and they're just knocking it out of the park, meeting their schedules. And, it's typically for a supply chain, the weakest link is the longest pole. So if you're got 177 components on the board, you have the cables, you have the batteries, and one of those things is out of alignment, and you can get everything else, but that last item doesn't show up for 6 months, then you're stuck for 6 months. There's no option. So what we do is we utilize all of our relationships and all of our partners to make sure that if the component that they have spec'd in isn't going to meet that delivery, then we find an alternative for them that works form, fit, and functionally that then can meet their supply chain requirements or the program requirements ultimately. And as you know, with this current wartime that we're in, we have things called DFAR, DPAS, all of these requirements for active fighters. And so all of these manufacturers that we work with are getting hit on a daily basis with requirements that are outside of the scope of our capabilities. When that happens, then we get the call and we find a supplier that can meet their schedule, can meet their quality standards. And so that's how we address that. It's basically a risk analysis when the RFQ comes in to make sure we're partnering our customers with the absolute best-in-class supplier that can meet their requirements.
Yeah, and you've helped a manufacturing model enable rapid prototyping and scale up for clients in the aerospace and defense industry.
I think it comes to the redundant supply chain, right? We have guys that are making hundreds and hundreds of thousands of boards a day, and they're not necessarily set up to do a quick turn prototype, right? But on the other side of things, we have suppliers that have those same quality standards that are set up to build boards in 24 hours. So it's a matter of partnering up with the quick turn guys for that need, for the immediate, and then partnering up with the follow-on with the guys who can build the high volume with the same quality and passing that tribal knowledge along to them on what we learned in the process of developing the program.
That's excellent. Now, without breaking NDAs or non-disclosure agreements, what are some of the most exciting or unusual things you've built recently, like any edge case use examples that you can share with the audience?
Well, I mean, they're all pretty exciting because everyone has its own unique little application. But I think the thing that's been so interesting recently is with the current global geopolitical system going on, we see a lot of military applications coming through the door. And it's just so interesting to see how all of these different companies, like you said, not breaking NDA, but they all have their unique value proposition. So they're all being successful because their secret sauce of whatever the drone is or whatever that is just bringing something different to the market that has a requirement that people are ordering from all these multiple companies for different applications. What also is exciting is being able to come to them with a total solution. So no matter which way we get the opportunity, it could be for a cable, for a board, for sheet metal fabrication, for any of these different things, and then being able to share with them, hey, what are you doing for your power? And then what's happened recently, which you've been really helpful with, is not only providing the batteries, but the pack, right? The complete turnkey pack solution that they just plug in. And then what's evolved from that is not only do they need that, they need to be able to recharge that. So then we're providing them now the charging systems. So, out in theater, these applications, these guys can have 350 kilowatts behind a trailer, power those drones all day long, haul that thing back to camp, recharge it, and do it again tomorrow. And, we're providing solutions for them that no one else in the world can do. And that's really exciting to know that we're really helping the warfighters. We're helping all of these companies, the subcontract managers, the program managers, the buyers. I mean, everybody's winning in these equations because we're adding value in so many different ways.
And that's why I love working with you. And you hit it right on the head, is that together we've been very fortunate to work with some of the world's most advanced defense contractors that are rapidly growing and literally putting things underwater, in the air, on the land, and even in space. And that's always been the philosophy that I've seen, or the vision that I've seen, is if you have battery packs for, let's call it drones, you should be able to have the ability to place those into energy storage containers where you can hot swap them out, even going into much larger mobile energy storage trailers with high capacity compute, as we've talked about two-phase liquid immersion, even to the point of having fixed stationary facilities that can serve as landing pads for drones, for ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, directed energy, and what have you. So it's unlimited that what we can build as a result of having energy at the core, whether it be small or large. And so, seeing that we're building all these things for all these primes and even for ourselves in our own unique product offerings, do you ever see, or do you see KTTS evolving into more of a prime integrator in the near future, or are you laser focused on enabling OEMs through best-in-class subsystem support?
I think it's a combination of both. I think one of the things you touched on was directed energy, which is, kind of a new thing that's going on. And what you guys have been able to do to be able to create that for the customers who need that. And obviously it's, proprietary information, so we can't discuss any of those specifics, but you guys have been able to provide so much value. And it's kind of wild. It's like watching Star Wars come to real life, right? I mean, instead of shooting a bullet now, we have these directed energy weapons that can achieve the same goal, so much more accuracy. And, it's pretty mind-boggling to think that some of these things, it's kind of like eVTOL, right? It's the same thing, right? It's like the Jetsons, right? We all saw the Jetsons as kids, right? Growing up. And it's like, the robotics and eVTOL and all these things that were so far beyond what the scope of reality was when those cartoons were made are all coming to real life now. And it's really exciting to be a key major player in that, helping companies do that.
Yeah, and on that directed energy side of the house, beyond being, used for like eVTOL for quick takeoff because of the high sea discharge rates, and even some of the directed energy that you see being used for high power microwave or laser or counter UAS, and we're typically seeing things that are from 10 kilowatt hour all the way to 300 kilowatt hour and greater. But a single cell, to your point, could be retrofitted into literally a laser gun with a certain number of shots. So it's real exciting to be part of that. So, your success, beyond your experience and expertise, is that, your partners are marketing ALE cells to UAV manufacturers worldwide. And can you share more about this network and who's helping tell this American lithium energy story?
Yeah. I mean, that has been recently developed as well. I mean, we started out as a domestic Southern California, Western region manufacturers rep. And, through the last several years, we've made that a global expansion. Our partnership with Echo Blue, who is the company who runs unmanned systems and also defense advancement, has now put us in a position where now we're getting inquiries from all over the world, Portugal, all these different countries that, have their own internal resources. But again, American Lithium Energy is just so far superior in the products that we can offer them that they're, just like what happened when we were back in Houston a couple of weeks. We met with one of those guys and, they're just blown away by the amount of power we can get in such a small package, which, I think the comment with the one guy was every 7 grams of weight gives them another minute of flight time. So, and that's critical for these missions, right?
So the pack, which is the battery, the definition of a battery is a cell in a pack. At the pack level is typically a certain percentage of the total cost of the aircraft or whatever the platform they're going into. And what struck me as odd is you and I had a conversation recently with a UAS company, and they were, wanting a certain price point at the cell level, that was such a low number in comparison of the total platform. So the real question becomes, if you can save weight, which equates into longer flight time or operation time, or what is the cost of every time you discharge a laser weapon, a directed energy weapon, it's not so much the cost of the cell, but it's the impact of what you're having on that device. And I can tell you right now, being an avid shooter coming from Texas, when you look at 50 millimeter rounds or even rounds that go into a 308 or a 227, I mean, the cost per shot is quite substantial. So it's taking those into consideration. And so When we're up here on your website, we're taking a look at all the various products that you have to offer. So, on this slide here, when you look at the broad range of trusted suppliers beyond American Lithium Energy, can you talk about some of the other companies that you represent?
Yeah, I mean, it's really a global supply chain that has redundancy, like I said earlier. And just back to your other point real quick, I think in my experience in the industry, you deal with different levels of people in an organization. And if you're dealing with a buyer, their job function is to bring the material in at the lowest cost. But when you're talking to a higher level executive or somebody who's looking at the entire system and the value of that system, then it becomes a total acquisition cost versus a piece price. And that's really what we're selling in our value is we're selling not only the total acquisition cost, but the value proposition of what that brings, right? So as we're adding value, when we get to have those conversations with the people who see the big picture and you're not just looking for the piece price, that's when we win. Because the suppliers that we use, I mean, it's like everything, right? It's like in negotiations, it's like the pricing always is part of the equation, but the people who see the value over the price, those are the customers that we love to deal with. And KTTS specifically is not a commodity, manufacturer's rep. So we do not have 77 component lines, and we're just worried about, being a Me Too guy who has, the cheapest price by half a penny, right? We're looking for customers who can really see the value that we bring with our supply chain, with our relationships. So that way we're strategically looking at the solution, not just the price.
Which takes us to the suppliers that you're working with. Can you talk a little bit about, I mean, you have a lot of products from custom lithium-ion battery solutions, which is ALE, to PCB, castings, ballast. At a high level, talk to us a little bit about the various companies that you represent.
Yeah, I mean, they all have their unique value proposition, right? So if we're talking about a domestic ITAR printed circuit board assembly, OSI has been incredibly as a good partner. They have a facility up in Hawthorne. It's a NADCAP facility. And, especially in pairing with ALE, what we found is that, a lot of these rules have changed recently from, they would be, the defense contractor would be requiring that they have an AS9100 printed circuit board, the cable assembly, but yet they're bringing these packs in from China, and they have no quality standards. They have they would work, but every time they got the pack, it would come in looking a little bit different, configuration, and so really helping the company like that with bringing the value that you guys bring to the equation. We have other companies that are really focused on just the fabrication of boards. So in some of the applications we're working with, Somachis is right there. They're a NADCAP AS9100 supplier. But then if you have a customer that's a medical customer who's maybe building 700,000 pieces a week, that's not a good fit for that particular supplier because they're really high-end quality focused on military ITAR. So then we have partners like OSI and partners who CEE can provide those high volume manufacturing overseas, which then, everybody wants to buy in the USA, right? BABA is a new thing that's, buy American, build American. But if that requirement isn't absolutely necessary and they're going to save tens or hundreds or millions of dollars by sourcing that one component from overseas that then can incorporate into an AS9100 or, a medical device here domestically, that's what they're going to do. I mean, you could just, the example I always use when I grew up, the first big TV we got was a Zenith. I'm from Chicago, and Zenith was made there, right? And it was the big cabinet. My dad used to call, I was the remote, right? Hey, go change the channel, right? You didn't have a remote control or anything. So now, if you look at the supply chain of TVs, none of those are made in the United States anymore. And everybody says, oh, I want to buy USA. Well, the reality is, if you buy a TV made in the USA, probably be $6,000 compared to the $150 TV you can go buy at Walmart, right? So there's certain niches where manufacturing overseas is absolutely necessary. But in the high-end military defense world, that's not the case, right? You want to get that product made here in the USA with the quality standards, especially with all the security features and everything that we can apply with our partners. So what we've really tried to do is just build a redundant supply chain that, depending on what the customer needs, we do a risk analysis when we get the RFQ, and then we pair them up with the absolute best customer or supplier that can meet their needs in the time they need it at the quality standards that they require. So all of these partners that you were just sharing have a unique niche in that. I think, as an American company, everybody would love to source 100% of their products from the USA. But in order for them to be competitive in the market, it's just impossible to do that. So that's why we have a redundancy in the supply chain for building everything in America that we can. And then when the requirement is there for the volume and for the cost, then we have those redundant, from nearshore in Costa Rica, all the way to all of these countries that are emerging now with Vietnam and Thailand and all the sources that are being poured into these countries to set up these large manufacturing facilities. So I think we have about 150 partners, manufacturing locations throughout the world. And it's really just a matter of pairing them up with the people who are best fit for what their requirements are.
No, I thank you for that, Ken. And that then segues into unmanned systems technology. You and I went to Houston to a show and just was so impressed with the capabilities that they
mind-blowing.
Mind-blowing, and who it is that they're working with. And so, as you are now part of the Watt-Hour family, you and I had talked about the importance of really highlighting UST as well as Echo Blue. Can you talk a little bit about who this group is and why you think that this would not only benefit their organization, this podcast, but potentially showcasing their many companies that they represent?
Yeah, I mean, as far as from an unmanned system standpoint, they really are the go-to resource for all of these global companies to source the products that they need to build their product. So, again, going back to the same discussion, if it's a company in Portugal, they have different requirements than a company, domestically here we have. So they literally have partnerships with every company that has every different types of devices. So if it goes from a blade of a drone to the motor of a drone to the wings, every little piece that makes that up, they have strategic partnerships with these guys, and it's really became the go-to resource to source all of the products that you need to build your own product.
It's highly impressive, and their marketing outreach and capability is beyond none. So I look forward to, how we can partner with them and promote them. And so, as we look at the future of powered systems, where do you see the future of autonomous and electrified systems going in the next 3 to 5 years from where you sit? And what role do you think KTTS and ALE will play in that vision?
Well, I plan on becoming the #1 manufacturer's rep in the world. And the way to do that is to partner with companies like American Lithium that makes the #1 product in the world. So therefore, the future is incredibly bright. It's moving at a breakneck speed on a daily basis, with AI being incorporated with these drones and now counter drones, right? So, forever it was just, building drones. Now, the defense system that's coming into place to build the counter drones, to be able to do that, and then incorporating, periphery with, the cyber security to allow them to, I was on the call with them this morning, and just up to that point in the day, they had already had 600,000 attacks on the network. And so as that becomes more and more important in partnering these defense contractors and these people who have these products that need that, just really being able to be on the cutting edge of all sides of the technology, not just the hardware, but the software, and bring in that total solution to customers. I don't even know that I can imagine where it'll be in 5 years from now. It's just like where were we 5 years ago in our ability to, get a iPhone or a Samsung phone with a memory, right? And now you can get a terabyte of memory on your phone. So it's like that was a huge room full of computers, a few years ago. And now you can get it all on, one little device. I don't even know that I can imagine what's going to happen in 5 years, but I'm sure excited to be a part of it and being partnered with ALE and our other partners to be able to provide the best-in-class solution and, looking forward on what that next requirement is and then finding a way to solve that for the customers.
So if you could send one message to decision makers at top aerospace and defense integrators, what would it be when it comes to battery system selection and supplier readiness?
Well, I would just say do your due diligence, based upon what your requirements are, find out who is the best in class solution for what you're doing and who exceeds your expectation, not just meet it, right? And I think that's where ALE really shines, is that, when we were just in a recent bid against a couple other of our competitors, we performed 30% better than they did. And, not only did we just meet what that minimum or that requirement was, we exceeded it by so much that, that's why we're being selected for that particular customer. So, don't just look at what the minimum requirement is, put your absolute need requirement, and then let us come in and solve that problem, because we have the chemistries, and with our zero volt technology, you were talking about that earlier about these things going into storage. Yeah, with the zero volt technology, these things could sit in a storage room for 5 years, and then here we go, they get fired up at 20 minutes, they're at 80% of capacity. So I think the strategic advantage of partnering with people who have patented technology that not only are the safest quality batteries, but the highest performance batteries with the most, zero volt. I mean, I would just say, give us an opportunity to earn your business. That's what I would say to those leaders of those organizations. Engage with us. Let us show you how superior our product is to everybody else's, and then make your decision on if it makes sense for the value of what we're providing.
And lastly, what's your advice for engineers or startups looking to build the next generation of high performance, unmanned or electrified platforms?
I think it's similar. I mean, I think it would just be a matter of, don't just go with what you know is out there on the market, because I would guarantee you 99% of the people doing that right now don't know about American Lithium Energy. And when we just use an example, they give us a requirement for a 3.0 or, amp hour battery on 18650. And then we come back to them and say, okay, well, our standard is 3.5. You could do that. And then we're like, yep, not only that, we have a 4.2. And they're like, blown away. How could we do that? That's impossible. That's the same size can as everybody else is going. 3.5 is at the top end of what they could do. Well, what they don't understand is Dr. Fan and yourself and the team have created the chemistry that is different than everybody else. So we're not making these things in China. We're making them right here in Carlsbad, California, and soon to be in Vista, California. And we're just exceeding. It's kind of like the analogy I used with the terabyte, right, on the phone, right? Right. Yeah. 5 years ago, if you got a gigabyte of memory, you were happy, right? And then it went to 10 gigabytes and now 100 gigabytes. And now, so it's the same thing with battery, right? We're providing them so much more than they know is available, then they can design to that level. And then their vehicles will perform at such a better level than their competitors that it just becomes a win-win situation for them to design the highest power, best option out there, as opposed to just going with the cheapest option.
That's excellent. So Ken, how can people reach out to KTTS or learn more about the incredible work that you're doing as a strategic partner for American Lithium Energy?
Yeah, I mean, the best way is our website, www.ktts.us as in Uncle Sam. And, we have all of our partners listed on there. We have a way, if they click on contact us, they can obviously call us immediately. I answer every call that comes in on my phone. So I'm normally the first point of contact, and then I get my whole team involved and bring in whoever needs to be brought in. But from a website standpoint, it's got a Calendly link to that. So you could set up a meeting to do an in-person, just like what we're doing here on Zoom or Teams or whatever. But just shoot an email. We're agnostic on how you want to get a hold of us. Whatever best works for you. Reach out and somebody will get back to you immediately, and we'll engage in conversation on how we can add value to you.
You're awesome. So this is the first time we've had Angel on the Watt Hour, even though she's behind me right here as a robot.
Hi, Angel.
I look forward to replicating her one day with you into the little autonomous unit she will become. But, on a personal note, it's been great becoming friends with you. Sunday nights in Bressy Ranch at the park right by the carousel, we're out there fellowshipping. So it's been a great honor having you on the show. I look forward to having you as a co-host as we work closer together with UST as well as Echo Blue. So thank you so much for your time, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been my pleasure, and I'm excited about what we're doing and what we'll be doing for the next several years.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Take care, everyone.
Weekend.
Okay. You too. Bye-bye.